Good evening, and thank you for joining me at Music Today. This is Keitaro Harada. The concept of the show is to bring in an artist each episode and have a conversation with the artist about a performance we will all watch and listen together. The live component is very important because I encourage the viewers to comment and ask questions about the artist to the artist. Music Today is a bilingual show. The live streams during your evening will be in English, and the shows that broadcast in your morning time will be in Japanese for the fans in Japan. If you want to improve on your Japanese skills, you're more than welcome to watch the Japanese interviews too. You can actually put subtitles on YouTube. Without further ado, I'd like to bring in our guest for tonight. Since I cannot hear you applaud, I kindly ask that you comment with clapping emojis, or you can write clap, 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 so that we know that you are applauding for our guest. Please welcome my dear friend, Maestro Daniel Black.
Good evening. Thank you. Thanks for having
Hi,
me.
Dan. How are you?
Doing well, thanks.
And your cat.
Tail of a cat.
That's fantastic. What's the name of your cat?
Zelda, just like the princess.
Zelda. How old's Zelda?
She is about 4 years old now.
Well, I hope she joins us with some meowing and some tail wagging throughout our show tonight. So for our viewers, Dan and I have known each other quite some time. 16 years of our conducting career, we've been friends. And I don't know about you, but like for me, you are actually my very, very first conducting friend.
Yeah, I don't know I don't think that, I mean, we met in Charleston, right? That workshop in Charleston. And that was like maybe my second or third conducting workshop before I'd even gotten a master's degree or anything, you know? So yeah, if I have any conductor friends from before you, they're not people that I'm still in touch with. I'll put it that
way. Well, that conductor's workshop at Charleston was my very first back in 2004, and I had just started conducting in high school at Interlochen, and we went. Dan and I went to this workshop that had about 5 participants in there. Yeah, and it was an opera workshop. And I had never conducted any single recitative or aria, and it was just the most difficult workshop I've ever done in my life.
Yeah, well, starting out with opera is not that's one of the hardest things to conduct in terms of technique. So
yes, definitely. Since that workshop, Dan and I've done workshops together in Russia, which that was the trigger to you studying abroad at St. Petersburg when you met your teacher in one of the workshops. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But since then, Dan and I've been friends. And when I was in Cincinnati, I had an opportunity to call up Dan to help me cover a concert. So this is a photo. The photo that you're seeing right now is a photo from Cincinnati Music Hall with principal oboe player Dwight Perry, who you were friends with before.
Yeah, and in fact, talking about old music friends, Dwight and I actually went to high school together, and in Southern California, and I knew him since before he played the oboe.
You knew Dwight the saxophone player.
I knew Dwight the saxophone player, exactly. Yeah.
And Dan, you played flute, right?
I did. Yeah, we had a little going concern for a few years there in high school, where we would play in restaurants and basically busk our way around weddings and stuff like that in Southern California.
Nice. We have several friends that are watching already. Dave Lake is a radio host in Savannah. Our dear friend Chris Allison is also watching. Thank you. Phyllis Albertson, also from Savannah, a friend from Japan, and watching from Ventura, California, Janet Black.
That last name looks familiar.
looks very, very familiar.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for joining. Fantastic. Tell us about the music that we're listening to today. Beethoven.
All right. So Beethoven Third Symphony. It's his Eroica Symphony, written in 1805, and This is the one that's famous because he originally wanted to dedicate it to Napoleon, and then Napoleon basically invaded Vienna, and so he declared himself emperor. And so Beethoven got so disenchanted with this that he scratched out the dedication so hard that he made a hole in the paper, which you can still see in the manuscript. And it's a wonderful symphony, really, truly epic, maybe the first sort of modern symphony in a way. This performance comes from a workshop that I did in 2013. Actually, I think it was my last or one of my last conducting workshops that I ever did. And it was with Kurt Masur. For a while, Kurt Masur had this Manhattan School of Music conducting workshop that he did each year. And there's the title page with the scratched out dedication. And so it was not only a chance to really dig into this piece, which is a phenomenally great piece, but also a chance to work with one of the great conductors of the previous generation, Kurt Masur, who was absolutely inspiring to work with and to see how he approached the music as well.
What was you went into that workshop with your idea of Beethoven and especially this symphony, this movement that we're about to watch an excerpt of. But how did Maestro Mazur's comments and his pedagogy change the way you see this music?
I think the thing that I took away the most from him in that is that he really, everything for him was absolutely about the sound. And, when you're studying conducting, you're thinking a lot about, how do I move my hands and what chords are going on, and everything he was talking about, everything he asked the orchestra was about the quality of the sound and the expressiveness of the sound. I remember him repeating the very beginning of that second movement, the slow movement of this symphony. Gosh, he must have done it 20 times just trying to get this exact creaking sound in the double basses so that it sounded kind of like a wheel turning over on a funeral dirge. And, it took a long time, but he got it. And it was just incredible, like the sort of imagination he had for sound.
Fantastic. Let's take a quick listen. That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
How much rehearsal did you have in preparation to this particular performance?
Well, it was a little bit kind of split up because there wasn't really a lot of time where I was rehearsing specifically with, the orchestra played this piece quite a bit with different conductors as the maestro was showing them different aspects of the music. I think I had maybe, 15, 20 minutes to myself, enough time to go through the piece and then maybe try a few things, work on a few things. It was a very good orchestra, obviously, you can tell.
Yes, definitely. And the venue is at the MSM School of Music concert hall?
Yes, and actually, I don't remember the name of the hall off the top of my head, but it's the main concert hall in the Manhattan School of Music.
Great. Bravo.
Yay. That was fun.
Oh my gosh. You look like you're just having a blast. And what a great piece to just allow your freedom of expression, right? Just be there and be open to the music.
And it's so joyful, that music. I just love this. One of the things I was going for in that performance was trying to get these just huge explosions of sound, because you have these long passages that are very soft and subdued, and then suddenly it gets massive and exuberant, and getting that energy is what I was really going for. And with conducting technique, you're trying with an orchestra of that level, not necessarily to show every beat and to really micromanage the pulse, but to really show the progression of the music and to make a difference when it really matters.
Yes, definitely.
And I think that was one of the things that I was able to work on there with Mazur's guidance.
Fantastic. Speaking of Beethoven, do you have a favorite Beethoven symphony of the 9?
Yeah, I have to say the 9th. I mean, so many of them are great, and I love each of them for their own reasons. But I mean, I don't think you can top Ode to Joy. It's just so incredible.
Mm-hmm. I have this vague memory of us back in 2004 when I asked that same question, and I think you said the 9th back then. You haven't changed.
Well, I guess at least one thing's been consistent since then. So.
Fantastic. Dan, also for our viewers, Dan Black was, I had asked him to come to the Savannah Philharmonic this past March because we had a conductor cancellation last minute, and very last minute. So Dan was able to, was busy that weekend with the Florida Orchestra, but got special permission to come to Savannah. And then COVID-19 hit. And so we were ready to welcome you in a few days, and then we had to cancel the concert. So, it's just, I feel so bad that our fans in Savannah didn't get a chance to see your work in person and for our orchestra to experience your music. But hopefully we'll bring you back, next season, so that, I'm saying this live here, so I make this promise.
I'm gonna hold you to that now. It's on videotape now.
Exactly. Until I delete this YouTube video, it's all here. Well, we have our concertmaster from Savannah Philharmonic, saying hello and applauding. Thank you, Sunisha, for watching. Dave has a question, I guess, a comment. It says, you have been described as having a, quote, droll sense of humor on the podium. How has that helped you talking with the orchestra during rehearsals and talking with audience members?
Well, that's a quote from a review of one of a concert that I did a few years ago. And I guess it means that I have sort of a dry sense of humor on the podium.
Okay.
I've been told that anyway. So it works really well with the audience, especially in like a pops concert type setting, like I like to have fun with, like John Williams and stuff like that. And it doesn't always work so well in rehearsal.
There is a fine line, right?
Yeah.
Well, and then it's also a matter of like if you're guest conducting versus if it's your orchestra that you've been, a family with for quite some time, so they know who you are.
Yeah, exactly. What I found is that I started out with youth orchestra was my first job conducting, and in youth orchestra, like you can tell jokes till the end of the day, and they will always laugh. It's amazing. And
yes.
Then you do the same thing with professionals, and they don't always appreciate your bad jokes in quite the same way as high school kids.
I could relate to that. Brad says hello too.
Hi, Brad.
So my next question for you, Dan, that I want to talk about is that the fact that you're, in addition to your conducting, you're a wonderful composer. And the other day I had on my show composer conductor Victoria Bond, and we discussed about conductors who conduct their own music. So my question to you is, do you enjoy conducting your own music, or do you prefer when others conduct and interpret it their way?
Well, I think there's kind of pluses and minuses either way, and I've had both experiences. I find that when I'm conducting my own music now that I'm a professional conductor, it usually means I'm working with a good orchestra, and and I really enjoy that experience because it gives me the time. I mean, even if it's not the professional orchestra, when I have the time to work on something and really shape it the way I'd like it to, that's a very wonderful experience. It's not always the case that other conductors will have given the amount of time that you necessarily would have as the composer in their rehearsal process to this. Or they may not have spent, obviously they haven't spent as much time studying it as you spent creating it.
Right.
So there's that. But on the other hand, it's really great to see, and I'll extend this not just to conductors, but also performers as well, to see what they bring to the table. You create something and then you kind of release it into the world. And sometimes people bring something to your piece that you never thought of before, and it's awesome and it's great, and it's just it's a collaboration even in that case. So yeah, I like both of those aspects about it.
I want to make sure that our viewers can know where to go check out your music. You have some recordings on your website, danielblackconductor.com. And I love your concertino for horn and orchestra. I remember you sending it to me. I think you applied for was it a competition? Am I making that up?
Yeah, there was actually a competition in 2008 in St. Petersburg, Russia, called the Prokofiev Competition, big, huge conducting and composition contest. And I was a finalist for that one. So they actually had a soloist and an orchestra that did the world premiere of the piece in the small hall of the St. Petersburg Conservatory, where Tchaikovsky pieces were premiered and Shostakovich premiered. So that was pretty awesome.
I remember you sending me shortly after that competition. You sent me your score, but you had to use a different name, right? You couldn't say who you were because of the competition, and it was submitted anonymously.
Right.
And I can't remember what the name was, but I remember you sending me this email with the score, and it's like, it's my piece, but I just can't put my name on it.
Yeah, that's kind of standard practice for composition contests, is to send it either without a title page at all, or to send it with a pseudonym, so that there's some objectivity amongst the judging panel about that. Yeah, I don't remember that name either. I'd like to think it was something incredibly clever, but
I wish I could remember. Maybe I'll come back while we are chatting. So Dan, not only did we, start conducting path and around the similar time, we also had very similar career path. And you went from Rock for You Symphony to becoming a staff conductor, a professional orchestra, both at Fort Worth and also now with the Florida Orchestra. Similarly, I went from Phoenix Youth Symphony, then went to a professional orchestra, Richmond, Virginia, and to Cincinnati. We both had a break from our youth orchestra experience. Do you have some favorite experience or moments from being a youth orchestra conductor?
Yeah, that was actually, it's a very different kind of job than working with a professional orchestra, obviously. And a lot of work goes into recruiting, and it's very much a teaching job. But partially because of that, there's an immense amount of satisfaction, I think. I got to see musicians that progressed, not only in how they played a specific piece, but like from beginning of their time in the orchestra to 4 or 5 years later when they graduated. It was very satisfying. Yeah. In terms of repertoire, I actually did the last movement of Beethoven Ninth Symphony with them.
I was gonna get to it because I remember when you did it, and I think you posted it on probably Facebook back then. And I thought, yep, That's what every youth orchestra conductor does. They want to check off all the bucket list of basics that they want to do, and you get so much incredible amount of time to work on it.
Yeah,
which is great. Yeah, I remember seeing that.
That was definitely a big challenge. But part of the reason for that, not only because I love that music so much, but also I found that one of the things about youth orchestra programming is you want to program something that's going to be really exciting to the prospective students, because you're trying to recruit them into the orchestra, and they have other options for how they can spend their time. And so why should they do the youth orchestra? And it's like, well, because you get a chance to do this. And we actually, in the first 3 years, the orchestra that I conducted doubled in size from when I started to that Beethoven 9. So, that I think is a very satisfying aspect of that job. And I think back fondly on all those students I worked with.
Do you have things that you don't miss about your time at youth orchestra? For example, the reason why I asked this is because I loved my experience at youth orchestra, and I still treasure to this day the what was the teacher-student relationship is now a friendship relationship, where when I sometimes see them from time to time when I'm traveling, and they're now adults, they've graduated from college, and we go for dinner and stuff. It's just amazing to have that bond still. But the one thing I really don't miss from my time at youth orchestra was just writing all the recommendation letters for everyone. Because when you have like 100 students, all of them want a recommendation letter for all the schools that they're applying to, and I'm like, oh no, like how many of these do I need to write? It was just such an endless process. And I didn't want to copy paste everything, because we were living in a time where everything was digitized. Almost everything was digitized. So it was every school had its own specific portal and website that you had to type in your stuff. So you couldn't really copy paste the same letter.
Yeah. Well, not to mention they might be applying for the same thing, so that would be awkward,
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, my youth orchestra was smaller than yours. I think I didn't have I remember having a fair amount, and they often would like wait until the last minute to ask me. So they'd be like, "Hey, can you write this letter by tomorrow?" And it's like, sure. But I think the thing that I find that I'm glad I don't have to do anymore is the scouring the countryside for recruiting. Rockford is a relatively small city, and getting, finding enough students of the caliber necessary to play in the orchestra meant every spring I would take all these road trips everywhere and, visit tons and tons of schools and try to recruit people to come and audition for us. And, it was satisfying, but, like maybe 1 out of 10 students that I recruited actually ended up auditioning, so
right.
It's casting a wide net in order to catch a couple of fish there.
Yeah. Oh, the youth orchestra conductor is such a full-time job that we wear so many different hats, right? Because usually our staff is so limited, and like for me, it was like staff of 1.
Yeah, I had 1 person. Yeah,
administrator and myself, right?
Yeah, so, that's it.
So now, tell me about the Florida Orchestra. You are now in St. Petersburg. From St. Petersburg, Russia to St. Petersburg, Florida.
I know. Yeah, that's.
You have a common denominator there.
I can tell you that they are not at all alike, those two cities.
Yeah, tell me about your position, your associate conductor position, and what you do with the orchestra.
So I'm associate conductor of the orchestra, staff conductor position, and I am conducting approximately, I haven't counted them, but it's somewhere in the range of 50 to 60 performances a year, something like that.
Amazing.
And the same was true in Fort Worth. I had a lot of opportunities to conduct, which is not always the case when you're a staff conductor. Sometimes you're mainly cover conducting.
Right.
But I was fortunate to have 2 orchestras that did a lot of outreach and education programs, a lot of parks concerts, outdoor concerts, things like that I'm conducting on a regular basis. And with the Florida Orchestra, I also have had the chance to do, they have a series called a coffee concert, which is kind of like a light Masterworks, like a light subscription that happens in the morning. So I got to do one of those each season. I got to do a Pops concert each season. And starting with my second year, I got to do a Masterworks too.
Wonderful.
Which was awesome because, you know, that's what we trained to do and that's what we're hoping to do. But as a staff conductor, you rarely actually get to have like 4 rehearsals, you know, to like really dig into to a piece. Very often you're trying to put together a program in like 1 rehearsal, which is a different kind of work entirely.
Yep.
So that's been great, and my colleagues in the orchestra, both in the administrative side and the musicians, have been just awesome to work with, and I really love that group of people. I'm very sad that we had to cancel so many concerts, and very much looking forward to restarting in the fall, hopefully on time and with our full forces, but we'll see if the virus cooperates.
Yeah. And you also have an amazing music director, Michael Francis, who's just, his music making is just so warm. And I had an opportunity to work with him a few years ago in Cincinnati, where he conducted Elgar, I think. But I just remember spending a lot of wonderful time. And, you know, speaking of music directors, you actually have been assisting awesome people, because you've went from Miguel Harth-Bedoya to Michael Francis, very 2 different conductors, but both wonderful personalities.
Yeah, and both bring a lot to the music that they're conducting. Miguel, I thought, had incredible sort of understated expressivity in his hands, and got wonderful performances from the orchestra. And Michael Francis is one of the best rehearsers I've ever seen. I mean, he's just got amazing ears, and he's absolutely spot on, and has great musical ideas. He's very, very well prepared. He always has a second or a third layer to the music that he's ready to dive into, which is very, very rewarding to work, you know, to assist and to cover, because you really get a lot out of watching him work. And on top of that, I think he's also an excellent colleague. He's been very supportive of me, and I think very appreciative of the kind of work that I've done for the orchestra as well. So yeah, it's just been a really good experience so far down in Florida, all around.
It was nice when the Florida Orchestra hired an associate conductor, and you got hired, because for quite some time there was no staff conductor at the Florida Orchestra. So they, you know, as we have conversed earlier today, having someone with experience, and you coming from Fort Worth Symphony with a lot of knowledge about doing educational concerts, being a staff conductor, working with a professional orchestra, was such a plus and a win-win situation for the Florida Orchestra, I'm assuming.
Yeah, that's true. And, you know, not all orchestras are looking for the same things in their staff conductor. Sometimes the orchestra will have more than one, you know, so they have like a more senior one. I think that was the case for you in Cincinnati, where they had maybe one with more experience and one with less experience.
Right.
So in our case in Florida, they were really looking for somebody that already had some experience with that kind of job, somebody that they wouldn't have to really teach how to do it or how a professional orchestra works, but that could come in and really contribute something. And the flip side of that is that they allowed me to really kind of shape the position in some ways. And that's been really awesome too. You know, it's great to feel that kind of trust from the organization in what I'm doing. So yeah, I can't say enough good things about Florida Orchestra.
Question from Dave: as a staff conductor, do you have any input into programming?
Yes, and there's 2 sides of that. There's a lot of concerts that I'm conducting, and I have pretty much the final word on most of that programming. I mean, I do have to go within certain parameters, and sometimes everything, of course, has to go past the music director before it gets approved. But basically, you know, it's my concerts to program. in terms of like the masterworks and the concerts that are not my concerts, I don't really have much influence on that. I mean, I try to drop names of soloists I like to work with and pieces I like to do around the hallways in the hopes that somebody will pick them up and remember them later. But and of course, sometimes they'll ask me questions, but I mean, most of the time our general manager and our music director are taking care of those.
Tell me about Daughters of Freedom.
So Daughters of Freedom is this is a piece that I arranged recently, and this was a protest march for the women's suffrage movement from 100 years ago. And it was actually composed in 1871, I believe, so it's been around for a while. I was looking for a way to commemorate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment of women gaining the right to vote. And I was surprised that there weren't really a lot of orchestral music that commemorated this. And so I kind of made the decision to just do my own orchestration so that we could do this piece.
Fantastic. Let's take a quick listen. And this is done remotely.
Yeah, this is a video virtual orchestra performance of the Florida Orchestra.
Yay! Amazing.
Yeah.
Did you video edit that also?
Yeah, I did all of the editing for this, sound editing, video editing. I did the orchestration. It was a massive project.
Oh my gosh. So that's a lot of hours from start to finish. It's a very I guess we had time, right?
Yeah, well, like you said earlier, I guess before we were on the air, that this show is kind of how you're using your creative energy at the moment. Well, those videos, that's how I've been using my creative energy. And that was one of about, I think I've done now 7 videos for the orchestra. Not all of them have been publicly released yet, but it started out with that project, which just kind of unexpectedly became a virtual orchestra. I was just kind of looking for a way to do something, when the virus started to hit. And then Michael Francis got wind of it, and he immediately had a bunch of projects, a bunch of requests. So I became very, very good at video editing in a short amount of time.
Well, that's another thing, right? our entire career has been conducting music, studying music, and then editing videos because we always have to send videos like consistently, right? So we're somewhat good at this video editing originally. Now we have to become much better at it. But we've already had that, the skeleton, the basis of how to put visuals and sound and cropping it.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I would say that video probably took at least 100 hours of work, probably about 50 hours just to do the sound mixing, and then another 50 hours to put all the video clips together and everything, and much more complicated than a typical audition video, that's for sure.
I wonder in future auditions they could judge us on our creativity of how we make remote orchestra videos.
I was just thinking, like, man, if it had happened earlier in my career, I could have used these for auditions, and now it's probably too late, you know?
Well, the younger generations are gonna come up with better things very quickly. What we're doing now is like dinosaur, you know?
Yeah, we're discovering this thing that everybody else has known about for years, you know?
Exactly. Well, Dan, so my final question for you tonight is, performing music has been such a routine activity for us for so many years. It's what defines us as artists and what defines us as, music makers. Then all of a sudden, because of this world crisis, performing in public has become extremely difficult. How has your attitude towards music and performing for an audience changed?
Well, I would say that when I've done these video projects, and that's kind of been my only venue for performance, since this hit, it has allowed me, it has made me miss the live experience so much, and there's a really funny aspect to this from the editing standpoint, because all of those videos, that's a bunch of individual musicians submitting their own individual recording that they made of themselves. And so I get to see these colleagues of mine and friends of mine in a very sort of intimate way, in a way, performing these pieces.
Yeah.
And then I have to put it all together. And it's made me really miss the actual live experience, the actual just talking with people backstage, and some of these videos I've just been almost in tears just because of seeing the incredible artistry of these musicians that you sort of take for granted when you're in the concert hall day after day. But then, when you see this up close, it's just inspiring.
Yes.
And so, speaking for myself, I feel an immense hunger for doing it live again, and I think that the next time that I get to actually work with musicians in person and conduct, an orchestra in person is going to be incredibly meaningful and special. And I think also it will be that way as well for the audience, and for the supporters. And, absence makes the heart grow fonder, as they say. And so I hope that that's the case for the orchestral world and the music lovers world as well. I don't know if that's exactly.
No, beautifully spoken. It's exactly the answer, to the question that I was hoping to receive. And it's very surprising that we have taken music making for granted for all this time, because we do it almost every day. We have been doing it almost every day. And it was just like eating breakfast, eating lunch, eating dinner, going for a jog, making music. And now that component is so not part of our everyday life.
Well, and I think I was talking to a friend shortly, not long ago, about this topic, which is that when you're a professional, you have so much on your plate. You're doing a concert today, and then tomorrow you're doing another one, different repertoire, and I think one of the challenges for us in the field is to keep that sense of love and wonder that you had when you first fell in love with music. And it's easy when you're when you have all this time on your hands. You know, it's harder when you're kind of in the middle of this rapid fire grind. And I think in a way that this pause has allowed us all the ability to just kind of take a step back and to just remember that just how incredible that music is. This is kind of a spoiler, but one of the videos that's coming out hopefully next week that I edited was some excerpts from Beethoven's Seventh Symphony.
Okay.
Which is maybe not as good as the Ninth, maybe, but really, really great music. And I've conducted it several times, including on my first orchestra concert ever when I was an undergrad and didn't know anything. And just hearing that music again with fresh ears, not with this sense of like, oh my God, I got to get this ready by tomorrow, but just enjoying it, just listening to it, just letting it set in is a very, very precious experience and a reminder of what this experience is like, why we got into this in the first place. And I find it very refreshing.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that. We have a few comments from, viewers. Chris saying absolutely true about, not being about the performance aspect. Dear friend, conductor Scott Woodard, also saying hello.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Scott.
Hi, Scott.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for spending your time and evening with me, but also with the audience to, just talk about what you do and the exciting project. For our viewers, please subscribe to the Florida Orchestra's YouTube or go check out their website. See many more of Dan's project that he's not sharing with us quite yet. But it's gonna be wonderful. I could see that first one that we just watched was already incredible. You only are getting better at this video editing.
Yeah, right? I've definitely gotten better since that one. So so hopefully the next ones will be even more impressive, I guess.
Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for watching, and come join me again at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard. We have wonderful guests almost every day. Tomorrow I have Darko, who is also another conductor, and then Gary Weedo, also another conductor, and pianist Ian Parker coming up the following day. So please do join me, and Dan, come back again on the show, and let's talk about other things that we couldn't cover today.
Sure. Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. This was a blast.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
All right. Good night.
Thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe, like, and share this video. ありがとうございました。チャンネル登録、いいね、そしてこのビデオをぜひシェアしてください。